Okay.
So much paper in front
Oh
of
my
me right
God,
now. I
you
don't know what
know
to do.
I would like to open
And I
the
was able to open those
December
attachments, but
11th
only on
meeting of
Chrome.
the Community
Yeah.
Preservation Committee of Norwood. We are at room 24 of the Norwood Town Hall as usual, and would welcome anyone who wants to come around, watch us do our thing. We are open to the public, and we also have the usual ADA accommodations here at Town Hall to make it accessible to everybody. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from November. And everybody saw those
Yes.
coming around.
approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any corrections, additions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second item is the long item, which is our new project applications. With the consent of the group, I want to go out of order though, and Joe has some updated information related to the chapel, and I thought that might fit in well here.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Go, Joe.
I'm sorry?
What handout?
So, I do have an update just on the chapel. I passed out three documents from the Greeley archives.
There's three?
There's three, there's one
There was
that's,
a pair and then a single, right?
yep, there's two memos and one presentation from
Oh,
town.
capital?
Yep, so
What-
cap,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Capital.
Appreciate it.
Okay,
So what we're looking at, just in summary, the presentation was given by Jerry Hopcroft from the
have
Permanent
two.
Building Committee to the May 2018, May, it says it on the front, May 2018 Annual Town Meeting. This was the presentation at which the funds were already approved for 1.1 million for the chapel, but then the second, in this annual town meeting in May of 2018, the Community Preservation Committee had voted another 400,000. So this presentation was made at that second visit, if you will. There's two memos, the cover page is dated April 19th, 2018, but below the memo that, I had sent, Jerry Hopcroft had responded to it. And then the third page is a report, it's just a selection out of the report from May 2017 for the Capital Outlay Committee. So I just wanted to kind of basically give you an update on where the chapel is right now. The chapel project, and John is going to talk about the balance that's available left in the chapel, but the chapel project is still underway, and there are still things that need to be done. Ted Callahan called me today and invited me tomorrow night to the PVCC meeting, and I will go to that just to get an update on the chapel, at which time Ted is going to present an update to the full permanent building committee. I don't know to what extent members of the committee know about this yet, but it's still a work in progress. Because primarily the reason it's a work in progress is because the town, and nobody's quite sure where this came from, but the town decided to have, now that the chapel is available, the town decided to have concerts and things above and beyond memorial services at the chapel. So I think we've already seen 2 or 3, and there's another one on the calendar scheduled for April, I believe. So that in itself seems to be beyond what the PVCC expectation, what their expectations and what their actions were. Like, they didn't think that that was going to be the case. And the reason I gave you all this paper is basically there seems to be I think what they're doing is appropriate, but those of us who are town meeting members remember a couple of years ago maybe that when the chapel was first voted on, they presented 3 different options. Option A was basically to keep the building vertical, to basically mothball it but make sure it didn't fall down, and that was the low budget option A. Option B was to bring it back, to repair it well enough, like new roof and various other things, to bring it back to a status where they could hold minimal memorial services and minimal events. And that seems to be the key, what's the definition of minimal events. But then the third option was the most expensive one, and that was bells and whistles and enhancements to the building and various other things. I don't remember the dollar amount, but I think there was at least $300,000 to $400,000 between option A, option B, and option C. So town meeting voted for the middle option, which was basically restore the building enough to bring it back to usable condition, but not Taj Mahal, not bells and whistles, etc. And somewhere in here, I think, reading out of this, the original capital outlay, one of the sentences, it just said, the entire facility, this is on page, I only copied page 9 on this, out of that presentation, because that's the only one that applied to the chapel. In the fourth paragraph down, maybe, it says, the last sentence, the entire facility would be renovated to its historic elegance and be available again for its intended and historic uses of funeral services and memorial services for residents of all faiths. So that's kind of Exhibit A. And then Exhibit B, when Jerry Hopcroft, back before we took our vote and before we, the Community Preservation Committee, and before we presented it to town meeting, Jerry's response basically said, if you look at the top of page 4 of this 6-page document here, double-sided, Jerry's response says, the outcome of that effort will be a building restored visually and functionally to its original uses for memorial services for all faiths, public access during holidays and special events, and proper access will be provided for handicap access, et cetera, et cetera. So that there's a slight discrepancy between what the Capital Outlay Committee presented, meaning that they didn't include that special events wording. And that seems to be the rub, that seems to be the discrepancy. So the PBCC, I think, is acting, they continue on in their renovations of the chapel primarily because of the special events that are now taking place. And it's one of those, is the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail kind of things, because they didn't create these concert venues, and they didn't anticipate, the problem is the occupancy, that because the concerts are basically selling out, they're full, it's a full house, and because they're an extended period of time and there's so many people in there, now they have to bring the building up to HVAC and exhaust and air circulation code, right? So basically the bottom line is Ted has met with an architect and a HVAC contractor that has proposed a solution to this. Although Ted was hesitant to quote a number, he thinks it's going to be somewhere between, he said 10 to 20 or 25,000 or something like that. So right now, I'm just kind of reporting back to the body that the work continues. Frankly, I don't think it's a big stretch, and I don't think, if we went back to town meeting, I don't think town meeting would object to what is now happening. So I think they're still acting within good faith of what town meeting voted on. That's my own impression, but I would definitely hesitate going forward to allow, for us to put in, maybe to the body here, we should put in some kind of confirmation to either the town or the PBCC that there has to be some limitation on the use of this, because it just can't keep going.
The use of what?
The
Money
use
or
of the
the
building.
chapel?
No, the use of the chapel, well, both. But the use of the chapel can't be further expanded, because that'll just mean the project will keep going and going and going.
Nice. Good question.
Debbie, then Cheryl, then John.
So when people are there for a service, which was B question, we said, okay, B choice, A, B, C, right? So people are there for a service. We don't care if they can breathe? We couldn't just open a window? Well,
That,
okay, but capacity is capacity, so no matter how many functions we have, it can't go for more than, what's capacity, 25 people maybe?
49 people.
Okay, so
gotta be-
49 is 49,
According to the fire department, it can't be, it
Okay.
can't have more than.
so it's not gonna go past 49, which limits the venue that you can have. We didn't change the heating system?
May I?
Please.
So the distinction between a memorial service and this concert type event, from what I understand, is that the memorial service would be a much more limited population attendance, less crowded, less breathing, maybe.
Yes.
But not only head count, but also duration. So I haven't attended any of these concerts, but my understanding is they're at least an hour to an hour and a half for more long.
That's long.
And it's standing room only in there, but, so it's that combination of attendance and duration, to answer that part of your question.
What about the open the window question? That doesn't work?
They don't have windows that can now be opened. Part of what they had to do to seal the building is they had to seal the building, including taking out the windows and hard coating the windows. Or whatever.
Cheryl?
Okay, my question is that at town meeting, the body voted for the X, Y, and Z. And at one point, there was money coming back to this board to go back into the pot. And now that they're adding on, I think the chapel's great. I'm not bashing that part of it whatsoever. But I think if town meeting votes to do X, Y, and Z, I don't think you should start back at the beginning of the alphabet and go, let's see what else we can do, A, B, C, and just keep spending the money till there is none. Because who's to say that on any other projects being presented to us, that, say, somebody requests 100,000 from us, and the project comes in at 75 by, it's all done, knock wood, everything went according to plan, powers that be, Mother Nature, everything behaved itself. So then there's money left over. I would rather that money be returned back to the board, put back in the pot to future projects than to go, let's see what else we can spend it on. Because that's not what is voted on. It is not voted on, what else can we spend it on? It is voted on to certain things, and I think we need to stay transparent as we can possibly be with the town meeting members that are voting. I think I would have been more comfortable if they would have came back and say, okay, we've got this issue, that issue, let us represent back to town meeting and let town meeting vote on it. Return the money, give us another proposal of what it is gonna cost so that everybody knows exactly a new HVAC system for that chapel is gonna cost this amount of money. It goes back through this board and gets represented to town meeting. I think that would have been the best way to have done it, but that is me personally, because we're not a pocketbook.
John?
Thank you, Chairman. Just thank you, Joe, for keeping involvement with the chapel. I know it's been several years now of maybe not the best transparency and communication from the PBCC and the progress of the chapel. In speaking with the PBCC currently, are they aware of how much money is available?
I don't, I got the feeling from Ted, speaking to him on the phone today, I do get the feeling that he knows approximately how much is left. I don't know if he and town hall members, employees have specifically identified the value that's left.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He knows there is money available, and he knows that what is now in front of them, that he'll be presenting to the PVCC tomorrow is less. It's less than the balance.
Okay.
So they're not trying to spend every nickel.
Right.
And I think what they're, personally, if I can kind of blend
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they had originally, if you remember, those of us who were on the board then, they had originally asked for 500,000. We scaled that back and we said 400,000. The fact that there was money, X amount of money, like 3 weeks ago, this has definitely been a moving target for at least 6 months or more. So I think the fact that there is money left, theoretically, we should be expecting that nothing will come back. Not the way that sounds, but like they presented something that they would spend over and above what we authorized. So for us to think money would come back to us is great. It would be good and it would be favorable if the results came back kind of under budget and within reason. But they're not marching forward just because they have money. To answer your
Right,
question.
yeah.
Um,
If
do
I
you
could
have a
just,
second point?
yes, thank you. So I just, sorry. I think it is good, just to make sure that they're aware of the accounting challenges and, the record keeping or bookkeeping challenges we have been having, since the inception of the project. I know that the chairman PBC has turned over, right?
Yep.
So, it would be good to let them know what we're up against and what the current dollar amount is based on sort of the new revised record keeping that has gone on at town hall to come up with the sort of this is what is left over, or this is what the dollar amount is to spend.
I would
Regardless of
recommend-
how much they're going to spend, it's just for them to be aware of what's available, because I'm not sure that has been happening the whole time.
I'm gonna recognize me, then Peter, then Tony, then Helen.
Boy, we all have a lot to say.
I have a couple of points. One is, I remember the original discussion as also saying that the use of amplified music, which was not considered an issue for the memorial services, but absolutely would be one for the concerts, would put a stress on the building that might exceed what it was capable of handling. That wasn't confirmed, but it did surface as a point of discussion. My other point is trying to extract the key points in my mind from what you've told us, Joe. The first thing that happened is that somebody, not on the PBCC, not on us group, not on any group that we get identified from the town, began scheduling events there in a building that was not capable of handling that safely. So that's the first thing that should have been cut off by some process that apparently was never engaged. The second thing is, if they spend $1 on any of the improvements that they need to make in order to be able to have those kinds of events beyond what was originally authorized, that cannot come from here. That has to come from somewhere else, because we authorize them to spend up to $400,000 on a specifically delimited set of changes and improvements. They haven't learned anything about those improvements costing more. This is new work for other purposes. And so, I hate to put it this way to Patrick here, but at some point, they're gonna ask you to authorize invoices, payment of invoices. And I think they need to know that if the invoices are for work that is not contained within what was approved, as this would not be, that approval will not be forthcoming. Now, the next one up is Peter.
Can I, sorry, but
Oh, please.
just to clarify, and I'm not trying to interpret something that town meeting voted on or didn't vote on a couple of years ago, but these two documents, again, what's in one of the documents and not in the other one is it addresses these specific events, not specifically, but it cites and other events or something like that. So I think that there's certainly an amount of gray in there that are they acting within or not, within scope or not. And we could flip a coin and decide which of these two we want, but I think that's, And we should certainly raise the flag about this, I would think, because not so much about the, excuse me, the concerts, but just the hesitation to approve anything going forward that's out of scope. At the very least, we should do that.
Well, I think in this instance, the scope of what they can do is defined by work that is to permit the activities that were used as the basis for requesting the money. So if they're doing something to HVAC because they're going to be having larger, longer events, and that's not what they expected to need for the kinds of events that they had originally authorized, then gray area or not, it's implicit in this that that's not approved, is my,
Yeah,
our sidebar.
yeah.
Peter?
Well, I think we're talking around the same thing. What I'm thinking about is too, is that if it's not included in the original scope, and we have to go back to town meeting, that means this is a different project, in my mind. So, I mean, so it means that the renovation work has been done. This is an enhancement, the HVAC system being an enhancement. To me, that's a separate application. They have to reapply for money, and that project should be, closed out. And if it's, something that's not in the scope and we have to vote at town meeting for it, to me, that's, I don't mind processing another application, but I think, this project is over, and this is an enhancement, and it's project 2, not part of project 1, in my mind. And that would require for us to vote on it again, because it wasn't part of our original agreement either, so.
So
That's the only thing.
Tony, then Helen, then back to Debbie.
Real quickly, because I agree with a lot that has already been said, that I agree that this should be a second project. It sounds like we had the options for good, better, best. We chose better, but now we want best. Wearing my Historic Commission hat, it's wonderful that once the building was rejuvenated, that people enjoy using it and want to use it more. That's wonderful. My concern, though, now, because I had heard about issues with ventilation or, say, cleanliness of filters or whatever, is cold flu virus season. I do not understand why the concerts at this point haven't simply been told to stop. And I love music. I'm a music person. But if it was only built for if it was renovated to the point where we're to have short inside grave services, which are generally 15 to 20 minutes long, and now you're talking about performers going in there, standing capacity only 50 people, being there 2.5 hours. You've got ventilation issues in the winter. The door's going to be closed. In the spring, the summer, the fall, you could open the door. But now you can't. So I really feel for the public's sake that, I'm saying this out loud, it shouldn't continue for the winter months. It should not.
I think there would be two questions acting on what I think is an excellent observation. Who is the one who decided their concerts, who would have to be told to stop?
Building
And who
inspector?
would be the one authorized on health grounds to tell them to stop? Neither would be us.
Right, public health.
But that doesn't mean we can't communicate this to the appropriate folks. Helen?
My question is, does our committee have the jurisdiction to approve an additional project for the same property?
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, didn't mean to open mouth, insert foot. We can only, the CPC can only propose to town meeting. If that's your question. So we would have to wait for town meeting.
If town meeting said, yes, would like to do additional work there, do we have the right to give more money for the same building?
It's not for the same building, I think it's for the same project. As we don't have the authority to give more money for the same project, but Pat, you have
I
some.
would say you could look at it as an additional phase of a project. So I don't think it's not like double jeopardy or anything like that. It's like you could continue, you could fund.
But who has to approve a second phase that was
What-
not approved in the
Well,
first?
they would have to come back and reapply, so
Yeah,
say
that's
they
the
wanted to
point.
do
So it comes to
additional
the
work.
same thing.
they'd have to-
Yeah.
Under
Right.
the chapter of law, under the chapter of law in the Commonwealth, can you do that?
It'd be a win.
Just to take it, for instance, is we just did the same streets. We did one part about the project and then another part about doing design and doing the work on the property. to me, it's, it's basically phasing. So I don't think, we just have to check the grid more than anything else to see if it fits, this could be not preservation or, we're gonna find where it fits in the grid as far as it, because it's not, there's certain things we can roll out right off the bat, but then where does is this a maintenance issue or repair or renovation? It's not
great.
preservation of the
That's the
building.
question.
And so, we kind of have to, but if it doesn't go back to town meeting, then it's just a continuation of project one. And we still have $88,000 that are in open, so.
Okay, Patrick, then Debbie, then,
Go, exactly what
Cheryl.
you said.
oh, okay. That was an applause line. Debbie?
Did we take out the heating system, or did we say renovation of the building? Was it specifically that you could not do HVAC?
No, I think it's a ventilation issue more than HVAC.
Okay,
We're
so-
just using that term.
All right, but we authorized them to spend, are we penalizing them for being fiscally responsible? If they spend, we were giving them 400 and they spent, I'm just gonna use round figures, 300. They're not allowed to come back and say, I don't 100% agree that the ventilation isn't part of use of the building. One of the things that I think we're supposed to be cognizant of is this is a public building, not just for people who are up there that are passed away. I think it's buyer beware. You don't want to get a cold, don't come to town hall. So, I respectfully disagree with if you go to a small space, but we're asking, well, who's going to use the chapel? That was a big thing, remember? Now, we've got people who aren't part up there for a service or have somebody buried there. I think we're being a little short-sighted at saying, we don't want them to use it now because now it's fixed.
I think you're being a little ahistorical in that there were different levels of uses that were put forward as options. And there was a great deal of discussion because the different levels would have different price tags. And so, in fact, we did limit the attendance, limit the frequency, limit the duration, in many ways explicitly, by selecting this middle option, as I understand it.
Were we specific of, it can be used 4 times, 12 times? We weren't specific. We limited it, but we
We
weren't.
limited it to a certain type of event, which would implicitly have a lesser frequency and certainly a lesser size. Cheryl and then Peter.
Okay, if they're having a ventilation issue, then that falls under maintenance. You can't use CPC funding for maintenance. That's why on every single application, it asks, where is your source of funding for maintenance? To fix their ventilation issue, that is maintenance. I'm sorry, I'm in construction.
You're sure of
That's
that?
maintenance.
Because I could see that being argued 2 ways.
The
Scope of innovation.
I don't, if it was just replacing ductwork, then I would agree, but this is not, it's not maintenance, whether, I don't know enough about it yet, whether there was ductwork there and they pulled it out, or there was no ductwork there, and if they had events other than memorial services, people just toughed it out in the past. I don't know that. But this goes beyond, you would be right, but that's not the flavor that this is.
Can I follow up?
Please.
What is it about the ventilation?
Basically, it's a sarcophagus or a tomb that's been enhanced to a chapel.
That's my feeling about it.
If I could call time.
Way to be
Yes. And,
We're getting into details that are beyond the scope of this discussion and this group.
Okay.
And so, my suggestion is that as a bare minimum, we should convey some of the main points to all the people who have their fingers on this, which would include the PVCC and whoever the heck it is who's authorizing these concerts and say that whatever else is true, we do not believe that the vote that was taken in town meeting authorizes the use of CPA funds for enhancements or for work that is beyond the scope of the work that was outlined in the original proposal. And so then, if they believe that it actually is within that scope, they can come back and make that case. But if they are being candid and open and saying, oh, we're just enhancing it because we need it to accommodate new demands on it, they'll know that we are not willing to go there. And since the only money that's left in their fund is our money, I think that forces them into a redo of the approach that they're taking. Patrick, would it make sense, maybe you could draft something and figure out who it goes to? And,
In terms of finding out whether or not this work is within the original scope or to the powered, probably multiple parties, right? Yeah, so the powers
I'm
would
less
be to
concerned about
authorize.
communicating questions and more concerned about communicating a position about what is permitted and what is not when it comes to the use of CPA money. And I wouldn't want to phrase that so gently and diplomatically that it was easily brushed aside. We've had too many experiences like that up to this point. But I'm thinking just the mechanics of getting a communication. If, I think you know as well as the rest of us what points have been raised here. If you can draft something up, not lengthy, but gets the key points away, and I'll work with you, and then it'll go over my signature if the committee is comfortable with that.
So is this, are we who we addressing this letter to? Is that
That's one of the things that needs to be determined. I mean, we know it goes to the PBCC because they're passing judgment on a work order and presumably the funding of that work order. But it has to go to the people who are scheduling the concerts and authorizing them too. Helen, something on
Probably.
point?
Sure, I think that we should copy the town manager.
Okay.
I mean, Mark,
Because pretty much anyone it could be is reporting to him.
Yeah, selectmen.
He's probably, it's his office probably that's allowing the
Mark
events.
is ultimately.
Okay. Tony?
No, just curious, usually the use of a building or anything of general government type goes through the Board of Selectmen. If you wanted to use the gazebo, we've been even talking about the Morse House recently at the Board of Selectmen to make sure that anybody that uses it well and properly and cleans up. So have the concerts been going through the Board of Selectmen to get the approval? What's the formal approval process now that the chapel's being used basically for rental purposes beyond what was originally intended?
Our reporter here has a question or
No, I
comment.
was just gonna say that I talked to the old Parish Preservation volunteers about this in their November 10 concert. Just do a little preview, and they said that they originally started doing it in 2014 before the project started, and also that they went to Tony Mizuko to get approval to do the concert, at least the 2 fall concerts. I don't know about any upcoming winter concerts, or
Okay,
if it's the
and-
same organization.
Tony may not have known the relevant background here. Helen?
But she's right, because the ultimate power lies with the Board of Selectmen.
Sure.
And those are the rules that are all being drawn.
Yeah.
The practicality of the thing, you go to the manager, but in real life, you have to get the approval from the
Yes.
Selectmen.
Yes.
Suppose we direct this letter to the town manager with copies to the PBCC and the Board of Selectmen.
Maybe it should be to the Board of Selectmen and then copy to the town manager.
Well, I don't want to make it look like we're trying to bring down the wrath of God on the town manager, I think.
It's just
Right.
concern.
If I
Joe?
just, I guess my only caveat here is that we don't, yes, something should be said. I would hesitate to put out a letter that says, we believe this is beyond the scope, because nothing that I've been able to find, like typically at town meeting, somebody prepares, town manager or somebody prepares the yellow sheets. And I did go back to Bernie and various people at town hall, and because it was an annual, they said that they didn't do a yellow sheet. We don't have anything in writing that said, we could always check the tapes, but theoretically, but we don't have anything in writing that says what the scope is. whether or not this was presented as part of what they intended to do, and that's what has that middle phase or not. So because of that, I guess I would hesitate to go to actually say we think this is out of scope, because I can't, everything that I found archives was, I can't find that to be the case.
Cheryl, then Peter, then me.
Well,
Then I'll be
Joe,
after you.
Joe kind of touched on what I was going to say. Easiest way to do it is get the tapes, watch that portion of the presentation, and you'll get it straight out of the horse's mouth. Exactly what was presented to town meeting and what town meeting agreed to pay.
Peter?
Yeah, just make this quick and simple from my point of view. I think we just need to find out if it's part of the original scope. And I think that's the first question. If it's part of the original scope and everybody's comfortable with that, then I'm comfortable with that. But if it's not, and they gotta go back and get more authorization for town meeting, then it's a second project. That's how I feel.
Okay, I recognize me and then Helen. I think we address your concerns in phrasing. We say, based on the information available to us and our discussions of that information, it appears to us that the work that is now being proposed goes beyond the scope of what was originally approved. And the reason we do that is if we take it upon ourselves to not say anything until we've had time to research the tapes, the decisions are going to be made sooner than that, and we will have lost our access to the decision-making for our new arrival.
I apologize.
No problem. We're talking about the chapel
Okay.
and things related to that. Helen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's wonderful that the building is being used. And I think that this is what it's supposed to be there for use. And I think it's beautiful uses, and I don't think that the music is the loud type. They have harps, they have guitars. It's gentle stuff. And I think that, I hope that we can find that we can help them out. And I don't want to be accusatory to anybody.
No, I agree.
So
It is a public hearing.
I'm getting an uncertain sense of what we want to communicate.
Because you're very intuitive.
Just the scope.
Patrick?
Yeah, so maybe, obviously, besides just talking to Tony, but in this letter, find out the original scope of work and what exactly they expect to complete going forward. So I think back to the original thing is we don't want to just all of a sudden have, finish one thing like, oh, there's another project, oh, there's another project. It'd be good to get some sort of formal, like, this is what we know we have to do to finish out the project, as opposed to just have something new pop up every other month.
That sounds like an approach that emphasizes clarifying things going forward.
Yeah.
There is still the question of, what about this
The work done.
thing that's now hurtling forward?
But don't we have to watch the tape or get the definitive answer from, if it was ambiguous, then
I favor an approach, and I may be the only one who does, but I favor an approach that puts the burden of proof on them, not us. That we've, based on the information we have, we understood the scope of work to be sufficient to permit it to be used for memorial services. That we recall that as having come up in the discussion, and that was reflected in the original work order. That, as near as we can tell, it is now being proposed or used for activities going beyond what was discussed at the time, and can continue only if additional enhancements beyond those that were originally authorized.
but again, even if you were having a memorial service, they have to breathe. I mean, I guess I don't think that we said no to circulation. I don't know that we said yes, I don't know what was asked.
Okay, well, we do need to put an end to this at some point, but Peter, John, and Helen,
That's what I was gonna say, I think we should end it, because we're basically asking the same,
Yeah, we don't
kept
want-
going- everybody's going around and ask the same question twice. So I think, unless John's got something that she hasn't.
Just,
but
yeah, I think we should be mindful of the clock, because we haven't even gotten into the core of the agenda yet.
I know.
Additionally to, the 5 projects, and that's, my proposal is maybe, Joe, you mentioned you're going to the meeting tomorrow night, the PBCC, maybe you go with some of these concerns, listen to them, talk about the scope. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 8th. With the holidays and such, I can't imagine there's gonna be anything done between now and January 8th. Maybe they can hold off a little bit, we have our next meeting, we talk about it more then, and go from there.
Helen?
As Jeff said, it was used prior to the renovations for concert purposes. We have to keep that in mind.
Good point.
Joe, did you have a comment, or?
Just what to, I'll do as much fact finding as I can tomorrow night. I can get in touch with NCM or somebody to pull the tapes, if that's the will of the body. We do have some time, to John's point, we do have some time before our next meeting, but we would need to, if that's the will of this body, that we put everything on hold with the PVC, not we put it on hold, but they put it on hold, then I can certainly carry that message to them, if that's where we're headed.
That sounds fine to me. I'm also thinking, after you tell us what you heard, if it seems to be desirable to communicate with Tony, then perhaps our first communication shouldn't be a letter. It should just be a meeting. Perhaps you and me and Patrick, or some group to be defined later. So for now, we'll see how your meeting goes, and and because it seems clear to me that a lot of variant opinions around here, I'm going to assume that I am not authorized to do anything without checking with some degree of specificity with this group. And I'll find out what I'm allowed to do on that with the open meeting laws covering over. So we have used 45 minutes. And, but it's been a good 45 minutes. And so, now going back to the agenda, we want to use most of our time to have an initial review of our, I think it's 5 project submissions. Everybody has received those and had a chance to look at them. Additional information needed and setting a review schedule plan. Would it make sense to go through each of the 5 and individually identify what kind of extra information we think we're going to need? Unless there's a summary judgment possible.
I didn't get my law degree this week, so this month.
I'm not seeing any disagreement on that. So let's see. Just going through them in order. The first one is Historic House Sign Program. Any thoughts, Patrick, before we?
Well, it's just gonna plan on anyone that's not aware, so all the applications are in the blue folder, so if you want it.
Thank you, Pat.
With your name on
What was it?
it. With your name on it.
Can't
Yes,
lose
with
it.
your name on it. That'd make it really good.
Okay,
Mice are
so
gonna have fun underneath there. The mice are gonna have fun.
we can go through them in the order they are in the blue folders, rather than the order they are on the e-file. In which case, first one up would be the Old Parish Cemetery Master Plan. Is there any question on whether this project would be allowed as a CPC project? I'm just not seeing anybody who wants to pursue that. What about necessary information? They got a quote from a reputable firm with a detailed budget. And this is an initial suggestion. We may very well want to spend more time to identify extra information we need. John?
Yeah, I think maybe because it's only been a few days since we've got these to review, just throwing out a proposal, I feel like we should have some more time before we get into this level of conversation. Maybe just like a general overview of each project and where the sites are and what the overall plans are, and then we could leave with some homework for our next meeting, January 8th, around come back with questions, comments, concerns,
It's a great idea.
short stories.
That's wonderful, thank you.
As you have questions, forward them to Patrick.
Patrick,
Yeah.
that's good, yeah.
We did that last year.
Did we do that
That's
last
how we
year?
did it last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that worked really well too, because then that document got published afterwards.
Patrick, and
When-
if anybody has the same question, then we can all-
When did we send down our request for additional information last year?
I have to go back and check.
I thought it was in
Call
December.
somebody else.
That works then.
Well, no, it doesn't.
No, it
If-
doesn't.
If we're going to be using the time between now and our next meeting to,
Thank you, Joe.
to feed questions into you,
Yeah.
we will only after our next meeting be sending out, authorizing and sending out extra, requests for extra information. So,
We're short a week too.
well, let's do this. People will send their comments in to Patrick. They include not only comments and some general questions, but specific suggestions of things we should ask for the additional information. Then we can come into the next meeting in a position to push the button on those.
Are we gonna vote on them at our next meeting? We're just gonna
We're only
discuss
going
it,
to
right?
agree that we want to ask for this list of
Okay,
information
gotcha.
for this project and this for that
In
project
January.
in January.
Okay.
Now, John,
So I'm just checked my emails real quick from last year to grab a date on it. It seems like we're just about on the right schedule, or the same schedule as last year. We're on our January 9th, 2018 meeting. Pat had a consolidated list of questions that we had sent. So we sent him questions, he consolidated them and pushed them back to us for the January 9th meeting to review a consolidated listing of questions at the January 9th meeting. So not even have gone to project proposal.
We're on track.
Yeah.
So I think we're on track.
I want to pick up on something John just said. You're saying that the questions we were at there were the general ones that apply to all projects, not the specific ones that might apply to individual projects?
Well, it's a QNAP, so I can't open it, but it appears just by the verbiage that we sent Patrick all of our questions for all the specific projects. He consolidated them and pushed them back to us, and we had a chance to review them and discuss them at the January 9th, 2018 meeting. Sorry,
Okay.
2019.
Yeah, 28,
Basically, we're
Does your,
2019.
does your email log give us a reminder of at what point did we get to actually making decisions about projects?
Oh, jeez.
Because I want to sort of schedule
Put me
back
on the
from
spot here.
that point.
It was after I came on board. I'm trying to remember when I swapped with Ann. I don't have it with me.
January, February. I think you were after that. I think
It seems
Maybe
like the
December.
January 23rd, 2019 minutes have answers from the project proposal individuals. So I think we met on the 9th, sent questions to, like Travis, in this case, what I'm reading real quick. Travis responded by our meeting on the 23rd. We gave them 2 weeks to respond. They responded, we reviewed it at the 23rd, the meeting on the 23rd.
So that's another thing, from what I got from Paul, I don't think you guys finalized a meeting agenda, a meeting schedule, I should say. So that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, we need to do that as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I think we
the
went to
third
every
item
other-
under this agenda item. And we can jump around to that and then come back to any comments we have at this point about the projects. So can everybody look at your calendars? It sounds like we were on a twice-a-month schedule,
For January, February.
starting in January.
March, I'm not sure if we did two, but we had
Because
our
there's,
regular.
it's proposed, it's
Yeah,
on the list.
So it would be in 2020, that would be January 8 and 22. And then the idea, I guess, is however many meetings we need and discussions we need, so that we roll out of February having ranked and rated and the projects and selected the ones to go forward. And then by the end of March, we have the paperwork ready for how soon do we need the paperwork to be ready to set up for the town meeting?
Sorry, so you want,
We're funneling down to, here are the motions and articles for town meeting,
yeah,
and
by then, well, last year we did it was the last meeting in March. We had everything decided. And then because after that, we were just working on the motions in April.
okay, well, that's the question. So we'd be able to use February and March for decision-making, and April would be for paperwork. And Helen has found.
This is in our package. What was this about?
The calendar.
Proposed
Right.
This is coming up.
Right.
Yes, this had dates for project review. The second meeting in each month was identified as a date for project review as needed. And that would be, the two a month would be all the way through April. That was what was anticipated. I don't think it quite worked out that way because
didn't think we had.
we didn't need the two a month in April.
Yeah.
When is town meeting? May?
May, second week in May. Can I,
Second Monday in May.
So,
if I can read to, just following up on what John was trying to do to recreate a year ago. But here's a letter that's dated Friday, January 11th, from Pat to Ramonda, just as an example. It says, Ramonda, attached is a letter explaining the next steps as well as a few questions that CPC has for you in regards to your project. The CPC also requests that you attend the January 23rd, 2019 CPC meeting at 5:30 to present your project and answer any unresolved questions. So,
It's-
so the timing, so we're right in that kind of sweet spot of the timing that if we came back on whatever the first week in January was, if we sent Pat questions for the next 3 weeks and then came back to that January 8th meeting or whatever the date is, and then this email that went out is what happened next after that discussion. Went out to the project manager, the project proponent, and said, here's a short list, but we want you to come back in at our next January meeting.
okay.
So it seems to kind
Yeah,
of coincide
following
with
the
what
same
you,
schedule pretty
yeah.
much as last year, so things ramp up in the winter, and then, by town meeting, we're back to once a month.
Okay, so can you draft up a schedule that we can,
I- That was what
I
this
think
was.
that's what, yeah.
oh,
It's the one we already had, right?
Yep.
This one, the one that Alan just showed you.
was that for this year? I mean, for next year? It is for 2020.
If town meeting's the second Monday, I think that would be May 11th. So I might be up on that 5:13.
So which day of the week does that assume we're meeting?
Huh? That's
No,
on
no,
the
no, I
same
just-
schedule of, first, our second Wednesday a month, and then the,
Second and
Second.
fourth Wednesdays?
yeah, so.
Okay. So if this looks reasonable, I will entertain a motion to approve this schedule.
Motion to
Right.
approve.
So moved.
Second, yep.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you for doing that, Patrick. And so, short run, we're gonna be sending our questions in to Patrick. You'll want some time to consolidate them, so we don't wanna use all of the time between now and January the 8th.
Do you wanna set a deadline by,
How about the end of the year?
I was gonna say, we could do January 3rd, I realize, it's kind of rough with the holidays. I mean, we could even do January 6th.
You're kind.
That really doesn't leave you with a lot of
I know,
time.
that's what I say,
Yeah,
it's
it's
kind.
not that busy.
Copy and paste.
Yeah.
Not to speak for you.
Why don't we give ourselves a
dates.
deadline of December 30, and the week of December 30 will then consist of Patrick chasing the people who didn't meet the deadline to get it in by the real deadline of January 6th.
Sure.
Helen?
Thank you. Is it okay if I just ask about this, the Morse House application package that's here?
We're not quite at that point yet. If we've got an agreement on the schedule and pass in the short run, then I think we are now ready to go through the individual projects and see if there's anything that already jumps out at us and.
We
whether
just
it can take
voted
the
on
lead.
it. Okay, thank you. In regard to the Morse House, that we have to let the Historical Commission know that the first floor is already handicapped accessible. It's the second floor that's not handicapped accessible. And the figures that they have, that there is a project that is expected to ask for funds about rebuilding the beehive oven. The original part of the house has a beehive oven that needs to be restored. And that's a priority because there's a hole in the kitchen floor. And so we have to, that's a priority. And in regard to the amount of money on here and on the second sheet, the only way to make the second floor handicapped accessible, I think, maybe, to install an elevator, and that would be much more than $100,000, I think.
Yeah, so in my discussions with Judith, I know, I don't have the name of the engineering company, and then she mentions it in the report, but I think she's waiting to get a more fine-tuned, realistic quote done within the next couple weeks.
Right,
So
thank
that's-
you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that as part of sending in people questions for this project, that kind of detail is needed for that project, and, we should send them that.
In regards to the beehive oven, I know me and Paul, we got something,
Yeah.
I believe from Ed Canolik back in the summer, and so,
Bricks.
I don't know if we can get that information we can include and give to Judith as something for her
His request is an exceptionally legitimate request, and he has, in fact, a retired union bricklayer who would be willing to do the job. And he has a cost fund and everything, so we have to, could we please let Judith know about
Yeah,
that?
she knows about the bricks,
Okay.
I know. Yeah.
That's important.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like we may be on track to suggest that whatever project is authorized here should be integrated with the work that's proceeding on another track, so that they each know which part of the whole they're doing, and they have a budget that reflects that. At least that would be a question for them.
If I could, just a kind of a point of information, but who is it that would be working on that project, or is contemplating that?
Eddie Canolik, Mr. Eddie Canolik, but we have to get him in touch with Judith Howard if the historic president,
But
She's the one
work
working on the
but
application.
is that a I'm sorry.
I think Joe's question was more under whose auspices, with whose budget, would this other project be proceeding? Not who's doing the work.
It would seem that they should be together, don't you think?
Patrick?
So this is entirely up to you guys, it's entirely up to Judith, and this is what your purpose is, but when I first talked to Judith about the project, and again, everything goes kind of back to phasing, and so it may be worthwhile to have her architect look at finalizing a report about, assessment of the building and grounds, including the beehive oven, including ADA compliance, as the first funding request step of actually getting that report with price quotes and everything like that, and then going forward at a different time for the actual implementation costs, but that's entirely up to, everyone here. That was just, because it's a big project, and it's obviously an important project, but it could be a lot to take on right away if you get all the price quotes done within a couple weeks or before town meeting, so I feel like the first step, it might be an assessment of the building and grounds through our report.
I like what you're saying, because I'm afraid that the alternative might be that we have to vote the project down for insufficient detail when we were in the end. This would be a nice step-by-step approach to make sure that we don't lose the project.
Right. That's all right.
Anybody have any other things that are, that jump off the page when you're talking about one of the specific projects? Let me throw one out. The recreation needs assessment. I'm not even sure that qualifies for CPA funding, because they haven't limited it to outdoor recreation. And if you imagine CPA funds being put into a needs assessment of everything related to recreation, that seems like it's way outside the
I'll have
line.
to double check, but I think other towns have funded recreation needs assessments.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I can't find where it even qualifies.
No, I found it on the coalition.
You did find, okay, I'll
Under
go
the
back on
project
it then and
database.
look.
That would be great if you
It
could
may
do
have to
that.
be, not to include the actual building itself, but outdoor recreation component.
If you find some,
Yeah,
let us know about them, and also,
yeah.
how did they delimit the scope of the needs assessment, because we can encourage Travis to follow that.
Absolutely.
How about the historic house sign incentive program?
Yeah, how about that, Pat?
Yeah.
I like that one though.
Yeah, no.
I like that.
It's nice.
I'd like to say thank you for writing that up,
Absolutely.
because we talked about that.
Yeah. I won't go into details considering I'm, wait till you want to talk to me. But, yeah, I mentioned that to the historical commission at one of the meetings. I'd like to obviously get the actual letter, and talk to Judith about that, and, the thing is with historical signage, it needs to you need to work with your historical commission to determine whether or not a building does qualify. I know it's easy to just say, oh, a building of a certain age meets that requirement, but, looking at how the coalition has done some of these projects, a lot of it kind of relies on, your local historical commission deeming, that sign or that project or that building applicable as a, historic.
Debbie and then Tony.
Is this the same project we did, the Historic Commission did, where we got the 150 properties all verified and everything? We spent a lot of money on that 20 years ago, because we had to have so many in order to, that qualified age, size, and information on them, and then we were deemed eligible to do signs. We did this 20 years ago.
I've seen the list.
And and the homeowners paid for the signs they put on their houses.
Not too many.
Well, I paid.
So I reached out to Sign Language Signs, which is the company that
Yeah,
the historical
I've been
commission
there.
goes through. They do the signs for Dedham and for Westwood, so they seem to have kind of they do a lot of these signs.
Am I
So-
reading this wrong? CPA, they want CPA money to pay for the signs for the private property? Or,
No, so
It's us.
the idea was to subsidize it. So the program's been around for what, 5 years, and only about,
Oh, longer. I think.
longer than that, only about 20 to 30 homes. I couldn't get an exact answer from Silverstein, but very minimal actually took advantage of it. And so if you want to find it, you have to search to find where it is now. It's on the Historical Commission's webpage. So that money was to try to, I guess, reinvigorate the program, advertise for it, and then offer some sort of incentive to subsidize half the cost for 25 of them. I think I mentioned in there, it's just kind of like a pilot approach of trying
Okay.
to get more interest in the program. Because the cost, obviously this is, it's speculative, everyone has their own opinions of price, and for me, when I think of a $300 sign, it's a nice to have, but probably,
Not a
$300
retail,
I can go to yard work, I can go to other repairs in my house rather than a decorative sign. So I think offering it for half the price if you were to apply for it, and you can get probably a lot more interest.
I could imagine that if you're a qualifying house, the owner of a qualifying house, that the difficulty of installation, the difficulty of doing the paperwork might be as great a barrier as the cost of the signs. So if we can find a way to make it easier to participate in the program, not necessarily cheaper, but easier, that might also help.
Absolutely.
We'll still have the question that you just raised, Debbie, of whether we're spending CPA money on private property in a way that is unacceptable to CPA or to this group. And maybe hold that over for a fuller discussion at a later time.
I could, Pat, I did notice that you had also done a kind of a best practices, and there's a page in here from Stoughton and.
Yeah, so kind of goes back to the recreational needs assessment. I like using the coalition's project database to search for similar projects. And so I need to obviously find out a little bit more information, but just just searching through the database, there were similar sign projects for historic homes. Probably not the same exact idea that I had, but in terms of just the program itself. So I mean, it was a little bit big, so I should probably reach out to Stoughton to find out exactly what do they mean by historic homes, but I didn't get anywhere on those that said they were specifically public buildings.
Could you also find out, how did the project work?
Oh, for those ones.
Yeah, how did they reach out to the homes? How did they qualify the homes? What
Yeah.
did they pay for? What didn't they pay for?
And that's kind of, I think, where I don't know if I need to probably vet this a little more with Stuart or to reach out to those towns, because I don't think it has the same idea that I was originally thinking. I'm not sure if it follows the same guidelines of, advertising some sort of subsidy or anything like that.
It could be useful to us to know what they've done,
Absolutely.
not to feel handcuffed by it, but
Yeah.
anyone have any other things they want to mention about that project at this time? Debbie?
Again, the Historic Commission did the work that there's certain guidelines, again, 20 years ago, they did the work, and it was 100 houses that qualified, had names. We hired this gentleman, and his name is losing me.
There's the book with all that in it.
Yeah, so we did that work, and people have asked me where to go to get a sign, and I go, I don't know. So
It is on the
I think
website, though. right?
if we could take that information, put it with this information, and say that work has already been paid for and done, which makes you qualify for signs, because everybody just can't put up a sign with, and that's what I would like to have, that information that we
Yeah.
paid for, because that was Historic Commission money.
So my thinking on it, obviously, some of it can just be free. And that's just, in terms of like putting in the work and reaching out to those 150 homes and saying, hey, in case you weren't aware, here's what the program is. Your
Right.
house was one of them that we identified. That's one way that can be done, tomorrow. The idea of making it kind of subsidized was, my thinking was maybe people were aware originally and just decided, for whatever reason, that it wasn't worth it for them. And so,
The expense.
I guess the point or the
Can we
thought
price
behind
up
it-
one first and see if they just
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
about it? And then
I
see
mean,
if they're,
if that's the case, I can totally do that, but I guess my thinking was that with historic signs on buildings, even though they're privately owned, it helps to try to create more awareness.
I
of
agree,
historic
I agree.
preservation. Yep.
Patrick and Tony, have you, Patrick, or have you, as the Historic Commission, looked into the possibility of historic signs for non-homes? And I'm thinking of
Yeah.
larger signs, the sort of thing that would fit on a stand outside the building. There's been a lot of that done very successfully in my wife's hometown in Pennsylvania, which is a lot smaller than Norwood.
There's I think, yeah, well, me and John, me and you talked about kind of like a few different ideas, and so there's a bunch are more publicly friendly ideas in terms of locations, in terms of sidewalk inserts or anything like that within the downtown. So there's a bunch of great different small ideas you can do to try to create historic awareness. The application that I wrote up, which, if you guys like it, you like it. If you don't like it, it's no harm, no foul. That was just something I tried to put out that I knew in my head that I could feasibly do. But there are a bunch of innovative ideas to try to create, historic signage to, gain interest and awareness of publicly accessible locations. And so it's definitely worth exploring more, probably in the next year or so with the Historical Commission, different ideas and for different projects,
Right.
especially with the 150th anniversary coming up.
Absolutely.
There's a bunch of good ideas.
The list could use updating too.
Yeah, absolutely.
or maybe some
If
people
we-
to help you out.
If we were in a position where there are reminders of our history everywhere during the 150th, we've got walking tours with
Right,
homes, with
that's what I was thinking.
non-homes, with, I mean, they just, you can imagine a very rich, historically flavored pageant.
Absolutely. I mean, so often, you kind of take it for granted because of where you live, but then you advertise it more, you display it a lot more, and people, it helps add character that people may
Right.
not think about in their day-to-day
Right.
lives.
Nicely put,
All
Patrick.
right,
Thank you, thank you very much.
absolutely.
And so I think we have two left to do a brief look at. One is the Mercantil basketball court, which I think the presentation says is very analogous to one of the projects that we approved last year, in that you're trying to improve the safety of the surface by putting on a better surface. I see, Cheryl, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, on the first pass of reading it, okay, the playgrounds, to me, those were, it didn't fall under like maintenance or anything, it was falling, they were falling under the category that it was making them handicap accessible, it was making them safer for the children, because then you don't have the wood chips, you don't have the splinters and all that other stuff. First pass on reading that, my first thought was, are we gonna start doing all the maintenance?
The fact that he's used the word repair in the goals and objectives, it certainly plays into the idea that you've missed the limitations that we operate under. So that may be a question we need to pose to him. Starting the list of questions for that
Yeah.
project.
Because it just, to me, and it's just me, and you guys can all tell me I'm wrong, I don't have a problem with it, it just looks like we're gonna start being the funding for the maintenance of things like that. And personally, I don't think that's what the money was intended for, but that's just me personally.
No, it's not just you personally, it's explicitly in the rules.
Yeah.
And as we've tried to remind the town on more than one occasion, so that, excellent point. Joe?
Just to that point, if you think of, and I was trying to come up with a comparable project or task that's been done, but and even though it's indoors at the Civic, but if you think of the floor in the gym that's been resurfaced every 3 to 4 years or whatever the duration is, yes, it's indoors, so it wouldn't qualify anyway, but the reason they do that is just general periodic upkeep of the facility. Maintenance. So at some point, we need to kind of draw the line and say this, maybe it's a better outline of what constitutes maintenance or not, but, conceivably we could be, and if it's acceptable, there's nothing wrong with it, but conceivably we could end up doing one of these every year. And we just need to, before we roll down that hill too far, we just need to define what is and what is not maintenance. To me, this is very close to maintenance, if not.
Okay, so we're almost back on schedule. We have just one of our 5 projects to see if there are any summary comments on left, and that is the volunteers Old Parish Cemetery Master Plan.
That one's.
Ellen?
Sounds like an excellent idea.
I think it's interesting. And the fact that they have done so much work already on the cemetery, there's a lot of volunteers, it's not being funded through the town or anything like that. And if this makes the history of the cemetery, I think it falls into a good category.
Definitely preservation.
Yes,
Definitely.
yeah.
So
That's a good one.
we may have questions for clarification or detail, but we're not likely to have make or break questions like the one we just discussed might
Yeah.
have. Okay, if that works for everybody, then I think we can move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is a financial review. John?
Thank you, Chairman. Let me just get my papers organized, because I have so many in front of me.
Boring.
Okay, so, updated financial review for everyone. Draw your attention to this report that was in, Patrick. What's that?
One-page spreadsheet.
The one-page
Yes,
spreadsheet
thank you, by the
summary.
way.
You're welcome. This was in Patrick's email. First off, just want to start by saying thank you to the town accountants. Joe and I and John Hall was there along with Patrick and Paul. We met with the town accountants back on November 20th, so a little bit before Thanksgiving. I just want to say thank you to the town accountants. Tom McQuaid, Sue Bartlett, who's here tonight in the viewing audience, and also Molly Ahern. And there was another person there, Dan Sullivan, who, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe or Sue, but Dan Sullivan is the consultant the town has hired through the Munis upgrade. And he's also a specialist in CPA or CPC accounting. So he's been working a lot with Sue and Tom and Molly Ahern to figure out the balances and also the accounts as they're laid out. So again, thank you to the town accountants for helping us through this and taking time away from their busy schedules. Again, we did meet on November 20th, and there's been some significant updates to these numbers since we all have met last on November 13th. Back to the summary report here. Summary report. We have the admin funds carved out to the right. Cheryl's request from last meeting. The open space, the historic, and the housing at the top section have not changed since our last meeting. The unrestricted in yellow has, and I'll speak to that in a minute. And then the next box, the next section is a listing of all the projects and the current balances in those projects. What I'm trying to do is just keep it consistent with the layout. I think we have it now finally nailed down with the admin to the right, the buckets, if you will, unrestricted open space, historic housing total at the top, and then the ongoing projects, and that's only gonna build, right? Some will fall off, some will get added, but that's only gonna get longer, hopefully. What I'm trying to do is add the update from last meeting, just to keep it, short and sweet, and get to the point, because in theory, open space, historic, and housing at the top there, and there's gonna be a few ins and outs, but they're restricted for the most part. Those things are gonna stay the same up until we get to the, annual town meeting process. So, update from last meeting, when we met with the town accountants, we were able to review and record the FY 18 and 19 actual tax receipt surplus versus estimated. It was one of our requests based off of the report we looked at last month with some detailed questions to the town accountants, saying, hey, we think there's some more money to be reported. So FY 18-19 actual tax receipt surplus versus estimated. I'm just gonna read through these and then I can specify the total dollar amount that has changed. FY 18-19 admin funds put back into unrestricted. FY 18-19 bank interest added to unrestricted. Those three together are the majority of the change in the yellow box from last month's 145,000 to this month's 481,000.
Nice.
Big difference.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Definitely worth
Louise.
chasing it down.
It was us.
Additionally, what has changed in the yellow box is the state match, which is exciting to present that it's $15,000 higher than anticipated. So the state match came in and hit our books at $87,162, which is excellent. That's incorporated in the yellow box above.
Now, they were gonna do,
The
state
unrestricted?
matches were gonna come in 2 payments, right? I thought that was one of the things that came up in our meeting.
I do not
Can
recall.
you say that again, John?
So
Patrick,
the state match is that's the guarantee, obviously, that's through the coalition.
Trust, yeah.
You know what I'm getting.
The trust fund, right.
Yes, the trust fund. And the second fund that we should be getting, that we were told we're getting, is a surplus.
right,
That's
On
I don't know
hold.
where that is. Yeah, that's on hold at the moment.
They haven't decided where that
Hasn't been allocated. yet.
excess they had has disappeared.
Appear
It's
to.
on, it's on Beacon Hill right now.
It's just kind
and
of
that was
floating.
what I was referring to as the second
Ah,
payment.
second, good job.
Yeah.
I got you, yeah, okay.
Okay, let it out.
Yeah.
They issued a check.
So just continue on the update from last meeting. So the admin funds displayed separate, that was minor, that dollar amount has been there the whole time. And, so then on to the chapel. So if you go to the restricted for project section, that basically the middle box on this spreadsheet here. The chapel, last time we met, last month's presentation was 126,380. You can see in this month's summary, it's 88,715. Back to the bottom here. Chapel remaining balance was reduced by 37,664 after full accounting by town hall. Town hall, the accountants did like a full reconciliation, if you will, incorporating the town fund money and the CPC money, and did a full reconciliation, big mega spreadsheet, and realized that 37,664 had to go back over to the town side. So that's the difference between the 126 and the 88,000. So if you ask the question, what is available in the chapel fund, it's 88,715. And that's the number for Joe, not to go back to an hour and a half ago, but that's the number for Joe. Joe knows this, but that's the number for Joe to pass on to the PBCC.
So this is to paraphrase, this is our money that's still hanging there, identified as such, within their coffers.
Yep, and it's designated for that project until that project is deemed complete. That's why we have not rolled it back into the top section on this report, which is the designated buckets. Some's gonna go back to historic, some's gonna go back to unrestricted.
If I could, I want to interject something only tangentially related. At the last meeting, I was doing some out loud speculating about what might have gone on in the calculating of interest. And because of extraordinarily inept communication on my part, it made it sound as if I was suggesting there might be some hanky-panky. And apparently, this got out to the larger audience, and some of them came back at Tom McQuaid, and he very reasonably asked if I would make it clear that that was in no way what I was saying, and that was in no way what I was saying. What I learned was that every dollar that we send out to earn interest is identified by where it came from. So you can identify the interest that it earned. And that's a level of granularity that I didn't know we had. That was the basis of my speculation. So apologies to Tom for making his life a little more difficult for a few days. And glad to see that we have the money that is definitely ours and no question about it.
Would you like to tell Patrick maybe what hanky-panky actually means? Because, just kidding.
Offline, yeah. Yes, Cheryl.
I would like to thank John and Joe for staying on top of all of this
Yes.
and doing their
That John. Yes.
yeah, and doing their due diligence to make sure that we
Appreciate it.
knew exactly where all our money was, because I think they were actually key players in getting this completely straightened out for us.
I agree. Great thanks to both of you. And also, thanks to the folks in the
Accounting
in the county. As difficult as it proved to be to get everything to line up with their new accounting system and all, they fought through. They responded in substance to the things we brought before them, and we've now reached a point where we can all be very comfortable with where we are. That's the way it's supposed to work. So thanks to them in absentia, and thanks to Joe and John here.
And if I could just, well, not because Sue's in the room, but John mentioned Sue Bartlett and Dan Sullivan, but not only did they basically put everything out on the table and reconfigure everything to the point of this is Pat and John's doing with Pat's involvement and contribution, but this is really the ability to go in and to it's building blocks. This is the source document, and it comes right on Munis, and that this document feeds this one, and this one really Reader's Digest builds to this one, which is a really good snapshot. So thank you. But if it hadn't been for not only Sue and Dan spending a lot of hours, not in addition to the accounting office, but the two of them spending a lot of hours to try to figure out where it is, but also just bringing us up to speed, because there are a lot of these things. Some of this money is due us, but it's not available. Just a kind of point of clarification
Please, yeah.
that I learned through this too, is that some of this money is due back to the CPA funds, but it's not technically available yet, because we have to wait for the end of the year financial statements and the state to certify the money. So there are some of those little kind of nooks and crannies and nuances that we haven't gotten to this point yet, so we didn't know it. And I just wanted to call out Sue and Dan especially. So, but it is a big help. So, and definitely thanks to John for pulling it all together. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank, again, thank the town accountants.
Yep.
Tom McQuaid, Sue Bartlett, Molly Ahern, and then the consultant, Dan Sullivan. Also Joe had a major role in this. As usual, he's very humble in his efforts, but he's been, helping me out through the process. Joe and his prior experience with town accounting functions, and just the ins and outs of town hall and how it works, and who to go to, and how and why. It's been a big help, so thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, anything more on treasure update, John?
That's all I had on my end. Thank you, Chairman.
So I think we're up to recent invoices, and Patrick, what have we got?
Yeah, so, I think 2 invoices were factored into John's handout. Those were for some minor work done on the Bond Street project. So I had two, one from Mercantil for doing some general labor to the site, and then one for a portable roll-off, which was just basically a dumpster. So a couple minor invoices for that. You'll notice that, when it says spent or encumbered, so under Bond Street, it looks like the majority of it's been spent. Essentially, the poured rubber has a contract out with, I believe, New England Recreation Group for $83,000 something.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is pretty much ready to go once, we have, once it's spring again and the weather is cooperating and the temperature is good, they'll be able to pour that in, really soon, and we could well, not really soon. So we'll be able to get
So
that
it'll
done.
remain closed until,
Yeah, so it will remain closed, this
Sometime
playground
this fiscal
until
year.
then. Yeah.
Sometime this fiscal year.
No, yeah, it should be done hopefully, I
Right.
would think April, May.
Debbie, you had a question for Patrick?
So we gave them the $83,000 for the rubber.
You didn't give it to them yet, no.
It's encumbered by a PO.
Yes.
Okay. So it looks like we gave it to them, but we didn't.
Yes,
Just encumbered.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that, sorry. It probably is a good idea for me to separate that one column into two. Encumbered is one column, spent as another column. So I can add that to my to-do list for the next meeting.
Sorry.
Thank you, Debbie, for the homework. No, it's good.
This is the only one out.
It's good
Like,
feedback, and it's
got
only
it.
going to get more complicated, right? So we're learning as we go. We learned a lot from the chapel, so the more we get it straight now, the better we'll be for these remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus potentially 5 more projects. So a year from now, we could have a spreadsheet with that middle box being, 10 plus rows. So yeah, I can take a look at that.
And any other expenditures, Patrick?
In addition to that, I got a invoice recently from Travis yesterday. Nord Engineering, bill for $3,480.50. This is for basically survey work for the Lower Balch project. So I have not processed or paid it yet. This is the first time you guys are looking at it, so I just want to bring that to your attention that this is an invoice for that project that I just received.
Okay.
So,
We don't need a motion to pay, do we?
I don't believe so. No, I've been paying as is, just updated.
Okay.
CP 1, 2, and 3 reporting. Is that one of yours, Patrick?
Well, so this was a topic brought up by Mr. Gurley. Recently, they were doing the distribution for the state matching funds. A few towns, forgot to process their CP1 forms. And basically, the long and short of it is the CP1, 2, and 3 documents are essential for municipalities to receive that state funding match. So that's the work that we have to do on our end to notify the DOER that we are, collecting this money, we are putting it towards appropriate projects, and we're doing everything on the, correctly. My involvement with it is pretty much only with the CP3 form, which is, it's just an online database. I type in what we are spending the money on and what use category it is, and just kind of give like the yearly review of what money has been appropriated. CP1 and 2 are both done by a municipality's accounting department. So, just going off the title, so one is a surcharge report, and then one is a fund report. So both of those have specific deadlines. The CP1 and CP3 both are due on September 15th, and so that's kind of like our deadline to make sure we get everything in and be good to go to receive our state match. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions or things,
I have one. Do you get copies of the CP 1 and 2 forms when they're sent in?
I do not know.
Would there be any value in having you have a copy of everything?
I mean, if need be, it would just be, yeah, sure. It would be sitting in the file anywhere, though, so we have a good accounting department, we've got a good town accountant, so I know he gets on and gets it done pretty soon, so, but I can talk to him about getting copies for us. Yeah.
Okay. Helen, did you?
That's important.
Yeah.
Let's make sure it's done.
Debbie, did you have a question?
So you just discussed all three of these bills, so am I to assume if it's in my package, you're paying it?
What was it?
The three bills, we had the roll-off,
Yep, so the roll-off.
so you're just giving them those, and those are the ones you pay, so we'll get those in our package, and that means they're pending payment.
Well, the roll-off and the component landscaping that were paid probably about a month ago.
Okay.
And the, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we're up to item 4, and we're right on schedule. First item, Community Preservation Committee Secretary. Is that thing we,
Kind of, so we brought this up, what, in the spring?
Yeah.
The idea of an admin person, and then it kind of, I talked about it with, Ms. Alkiotis, of just a very basic secretarial position of taking notes. The whole concept is, other towns, I can obviously bring in examples of variations of a position that other communities have created. Some have a full-time person, some have just a secretary, some have a part-time admin person. It's just another option for the committee to think about and discuss if that's a worthwhile position or something with admin funds. So.
Cheryl?
I have a question for you, Patrick. If we have somebody that comes in and records our meetings like you're doing now, would that help to free up some of your time? So you are not doing that part of the clerical? Because I know all the other boards have somebody that's all they do. They go to the meetings, they take all the minutes, and then they type up the minutes. And they get paid whatever
The going
the
rate.
going rate is for that.
Yeah.
Would that help you out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the intention was, at least from a secretarial standpoint, someone focuses on the minutes, and I can be more engaged or focused on the minutes.
totally agree.
As
Yeah.
opposed to just writing. So.
The one other town function where I'm involved in, there is a secretary who's hired to do just that. It certainly has the advantages you're talking about. It frees up staff from the library who would otherwise, and in some instances do, fill in on that function. The downside is that you have somebody who's not as instantly familiar with all the shorthand phrases and names that get bandied about in the discussion. And it can be time-consuming on the proofing the minutes end of things, unless you've got somebody who's come rapidly up the learning curve on that.
So,
Patrick.
so the planning board actually so we had a recording secretary for about 2 years. She got a new job teaching, so she stepped down. So we just hired a new secretary as well. There's always a learning curve, I think, and there's always kind of like you get the first draft, and so we'll have to edit. But I do know just having the other secretary on for 2 years, the majority of her edits, it was just a nice extra thing to kind of have done out of the way, and you had someone that gave you reliable minutes, and freed up your time to get, I don't want to say more important, but more work done that's focused on the meeting, or other critical components of the meeting, so.
Cheryl?
Okay, I'm advocating for this, as you're gonna be able to tell. Sometimes Ramonda can't make it to our meetings, and Emma does them. And all what Emma does on a sheet is she tracks who's making the motions, who's seconding them, and what the motion is. But there's a recorder that's actually recording the entire meeting. And then from that, that's what the minutes is drawn up from. And then all, the motion is on the hard copy.
The other thing that is a personal preference on my part that very few organizations follow is minutes in that form tend to be action items only. Motions, seconds, approvals or disapprovals. If you get a particularly rich discussion, that's not gonna survive except on tape somewhere.
Yeah.
And I've been in meetings that did both, and I found the richer discussion to be valuable. But it is a commitment, and it's not everybody's preference, even as the recipients of that material. So what's the sense of the group on whether we should pursue having somebody in that function? Joe?
I think it's, number one, it's evolution, because the further, as John said, about the number of projects we've got in play, you know, it can only grow. Pat has done, Paul and Pat, the Pat and Pat team, but they've done a great job of being able to contribute and lead where necessary, and give the committee, I guess what I'd call value-added service. That if, you know, it definitely makes sense that if we could lift some of the purely administrative duties from Pat's task list, then he can rise into a new level and contribute at an even higher level. I don't think necessarily we have to do this right away, but I think, you know, whether we created, you know, specifically a better understanding for all of us of what this new person would do. If we took a month, you know, if we commit, I'm just kind of winging it as far as dates, but if we finalized the plan at the end of January, put out a post at the end of February, brought somebody on board March-ish, then we could, you know, we wouldn't have to wait until next year. That we don't have to wait anyway. But I think the sooner we do this, the better. And especially if it frees up time as we approach town meeting, March, April, May, because that's going to be our busiest time. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's due to happen, and the better organized we can make it, the better, as opposed to having something just kind of thrown at us from somebody who's not in this room. So.
Peter?
What I think we should do is investigate job descriptions and get some ideas of, like the positions you're talking about, you know, who's already, you know, the jobs that are already being done by other people and other committees, get their job descriptions and also get an idea what the budget would be, and then we can figure out where we want to go from there.
Patrick?
So, like I mentioned, so we just recently hired a recording secretary. We have a, you know, pretty standard job description that we've used for other, you know, boards and committees in the town. And it would be an idea if we have time at the next meeting to kind of have a breakdown of like, here's, you know, your bare minimum recording secretary, here's a job description of what a part-time person does in another town, here's a job description of what a full-time person does in another town. Not saying you want to pick, you know, the later two ideas, but just kind of an idea of, you know, how other towns that have had the CPC or the CPA for a while have progressed and where they are at with staff support in different intervals. So obviously we're about 3 years now, so take a look at a town that's had it for the majority of the time, see where a town's at that's had for 5 years. You know, where were they at with their demographics as well in terms of population, and see what our comparables are. So I mean, I know Canton in particular, their CPC admin help, and get a good idea of what that job description is, just to compare, just to see it.
And you'd give us that info?
Yeah.
That would be
That would be
great.
helpful.
And I want to underscore another point that Peter made, which is the budget. We have a 5% hard cap on administrative costs, and we have administrative costs that are predictable that are not involved with this. So I'd be interested in knowing what the cost of these options are compared to the unallocated administrative budget that we tend to have each year. John, and then Helen.
I think there was a question that came up initially when we were speaking about this in the spring in regards to benefits and the correlating expense, whether or not that's would come out of our funds or the general town side funds. And then I guess the question is how many hours a week, but part-time, full-time, to provide benefits.
Helen and then Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The planning board used to have a full-time secretary, Patrick, right?
Yep.
So this person now, is this a part-time person?
So the planning board secretary before that was, I guess more of a, I think she was half-time when Paul got on. Then she was a general admin person that you would see in other departments, and then she also filled in doing secretary duties at night for the planning board. The person that we have now she, you know, we're looking at 2 to 3 hours per meeting in terms of recording the minutes during the meeting, coming to the meeting, and then taking time at home to edit. So this person, and planning board meets twice a month, so I mean, we're looking at between 5 and 6 hours a month.
So,
realistically, that they
and the
work.
person that the Conservation Commission has is a part-time position.
Well, Ramonda does more for us, but when we use a fill-in, we're just using them as a recording secretary, and that is it. They don't touch anything else of ours. And we don't have to go full throttle and go like a full like secretary or whatever. I just think if we start with a recording secretary, so we're not blowing our admin budget, we're not doing benefits or anything, because it's just a few hours a month, and it'll vary from month to month depending what season we are in and what we're doing. But I think if we get the recording part, because then that person just sets off and they don't participate in the discussions. They're just recording, and that is it, and they're taking notes. They don't participate, we don't ask them any questions or anything. But we rely so heavily on Patrick that we need to pick his brain.
I agree.
And it's hard to be picking his brain if he's being a recording secretary.
I want to go back to one of Helen's questions that I'm not sure I recognize the answer to, which is, whose budget does this person come out of? Our budget or the department's budget? Certainly, if you've got somebody who's doing both kinds of work,
It would be out of the Community Preservation Committee's admin funds.
and therefore, they'd only be working for us.
Right.
Yes, if you hire them for that purpose. I mean, there's a million different ways you can go on. Say you hired someone that, hypothetically, say Emma wants to be the admin person for us. She would get paid separately for doing Concom minutes, then she would get paid separately for doing CPA minutes. So, I mean, we wouldn't combine, in a way you would combine their different accounts, but you'd be billing, or they would be getting paid from different pots. I don't know.
The sense I'm getting from around the table is that some people are in favor of this and some people are wildly in favor of this, and nobody's against it. So if somebody is against it, this is your chance to speak up. Otherwise, Patrick, I think we'd like to go to the next step of getting some sample job descriptions and
Absolutely.
budgets and with the intent of probably moving forward, as Joe said, quicker rather than later.
I agree.
I'm just looking at a recording secretary, not a full-fledged
Correct.
admin, because I don't think we have the funding to, support it. But I think this is just a way that if we pay somebody just to go, okay, take notes, take minutes, just be quiet, sit in your corner, and, oh, by the way, Patrick,
Yeah.
Okay.
it's like, Patrick, we need answers to this, and it allows them to do it. Because if you watch Patrick, he's writing everything down, but he's trying to participate. And I've done recordings as a secretary and tried to participate on a board, and it's very, very difficult
I
to
have that
do.
experience as
You really
well.
can't affect
You
it.
can't, you miss things.
But I think, Patrick, although I think most of the group is thinking, let's go directly to a recording secretary, if it's easy to have some of the other options as examples, sounds like it is, it would be a useful context, I think, for us to know.
Yeah, I think that's, you hit Shirley pretty much on the head. I mean, I don't think I can handle the admin side in terms of, project management. I don't think we're at that stage where we need to have another person personally, other than a recording secretary, but, obviously, if you're in Somerville or Cambridge and you have your CPA admin budget is so big and you're a bigger community, that's a whole different thing. Or if you're a community that's had the CPA for many years and you kind of have a dozen projects, things can change over time. But I think it's a good idea just to see what other towns have done, because it's a great way to copycat and look and see what other communities have done before, because there's hundreds that
Absolutely.
are coalition members. So.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Approved project updates. We had a bit of that with the invoices. Joe, anything new with the Caroline?
Yep, so I met last week with Bernie Cooper and Lee Leach, just to try to get a feel for where we were with the Caroline project. There's two, at this point, there's two gating factors. They did have an engineering firm come out and do a review of the Caroline, and Bernie and Lee are waiting for that vendor to come back with their results. Basically, that they were did and will do. It's kind of a two-phase thing, but they will do things like testing the paint as to whether or not there's lead paint in it, trying to determine the stability of the frame of the Caroline, not so much the bells, but the frame that it sits on, and also just to try to scope out whatever, everything else in the project. So that's number one, and that's fresh and in play, and Bernie was gonna get in touch with the vendor to try to figure out where they were with that quote. That's probably the lesser, it's definitely the lesser. There's three components. One is that upfront engineering work. The second aspect is the painting of the frame. And then the third aspect is taking down the bells and the clappers and the connectors and all the bells and literally the bells and whistles, and hauling those off to the foundry in Virginia to get them refurbished. So they're not, I think, I was gonna say they're on track, but they're a little behind track. But there is some amount of urgency to get things done for the summer Caroline series. There's not a lot that happens between basically now and, let's say, the 4th of July, the end of June, let's say. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The second aspect of that is the internal workings of purchase orders and quotes and bids and things like that, depending on the scope of that first engineering work, that will give us detail that we will then work into the bid for the painting and everything that happens downstream from that.
I got a follow-up on one of the points you made, looking for lead. Are there any things like that where a surprise finding could blow up the schedule and the budget?
Let me give you a wimpy disclaimer to say anything's possible. Both Bernie and Lee remember that when this type of work was done in the early 80s, it was at that point that the vendor of vendors were supposed to remove any lead from the Caroline or surrounding frame or whatever. So the answer is written in pencil that we say we hope not. But
So it's,
remains to be seen.
It's informed optimism.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Debbie?
Why do we care about lead?
Right.
Why do we care about lead? There's no kids around, it's contained, it's not a public space, it's just the bells that are,
Pre-existing.
If they're scraping.
yeah, but where nobody's up there.
Doesn't.
We've got pictures that show tour groups. So I don't think we can take that on as a risk that we're willing to accept for ourselves. And how about,
And I will continue
Okay.
to bring back updates as available.
Joe.
So.
Cheryl,
Ours hasn't even gone out to bid.
and why is that?
If I could.
You're too loud, like.
She left that really hanging.
Go ahead.
I did see the eyes look this way as well, but there is that second part of what I was talking about, not to speak for Cheryl,
No, go ahead.
but the second part of that is the internal workings of the process inside the building. And there does seem to be, like Travis, for instance, if we can compare the Bond Street playground, which they're already rocking and rolling, and there's spending happening, which is like the third step along the way. So that project, Travis basically jumped in and said, how do we make this happen? Let's do it today. And, I'm gonna get in touch with the people that I need to get in touch with and just make things happen. As opposed, so I think there's twofold. One, there's a lot going on in town hall, so if we don't have an in-house advocate like a Travis,
We do though.
let me rephrase that.
Okay.
If we don't have I won't say an active and vocal advocate, but if we don't constantly stay on top of that process, everything else is gonna take precedent and things won't move as quickly as they need to.
If I heard you right, there are two things.
I'm sorry, I am trying to be diplomatic.
I know, and
Oh, really?
I'm about to try that too.
I'm not saying
We'll
it.
see how successful I am, as you certainly have been. There are a couple of things that are causing delays. One is the continued challenge of taking on the new system and perhaps a recent surge in volume of purchase orders townwide. And that will affect everybody the same way. It can be offset by somebody who's not only assertive and not only on site, but maybe just as unusual bureaucratic skills or unusual luck in working the system. And some of our projects have had all of that, and others have not been able to overcome the general slowdown. And I hope that's diplomatic enough so that nobody feels like they've been singled out for blame, because I've already been burned appearing to do that once.
I will
That's
take,
why Maud's keeping her mouth shut.
I will take one for the team, not so you can get in trouble, but the implementation of the Munis system is for the most part, it's behind us. They were into the next phase. Pat wants to get paid next month, and as of January 1st, the next phase of the conversion is to convert the payroll system, which hasn't happened yet. So all eyes are focused on the payroll part of that. But that has nothing to do with purchase orders. I know you were trying to put in,
No, but-
contributing factors, but frankly, that's not one of them.
I'm thinking like automobile traffic, that after the thing that slows the cars down has been taken out, you've still got a standing queue, which it takes a long time to clear. Patrick is desperately trying
No,
to
I
clarify here.
I think the conversion to Munis certainly impacted anything progressing over the summer. In terms of the timing or who got there first or whatnot, above me, I had no idea. I do know obviously timing right now, you can't really get a lot of work done with the snow on the ground. So I don't particularly know if there's a reason they're holding off on putting it out to bid just yet. I do know, I think we all know that project itself for the pavilion, it's pretty straightforward. Once the vendor is selected, it's quick to put up. So it's
Okay.
I don't know where.
I've got Helen as the voice of experience here, who has some thoughts.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna comment about that. Please forgive me, I have another commitment that I have to
Oh,
get to.
okay.
It's 7:30, so I have to run. But
Merry
happy
Christmas.
holidays,
Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Finish them up, everybody finish them up.
Okay.
They were excellent. Happy
Can I offer you a
holidays.
candy cane that I made this myself in my kitchen?
Before we dissolve into holiday chaos, I believe we've actually finished the agenda because the
Yeah,
winter, spring meeting dates we covered earlier, so
yeah, we got a sheet here.
unless somebody thinks of something else in the next 5 seconds, even that is too long. Anyone seconding?
Second.
Okay, and all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Holidays.
Happy season.